I had such a good time. My husband was a singer, and I sang, and we enjoyed this. Well, when we got to the resort, there wasn't much singing, but there was a lot of laundry and cooking.
We worked all the time. I never went to the beach swimming in the summer. My dad says you'll go after the summer.
Dad used to move us out of our rooms and rent the rooms out, and he'd pitch a tent in the alley, and that's where we stayed during the summer.
But my father wouldn't let us sleep. He used to get us up all early, 6 o'clock. We'd have to go in the dining room, set the tables, and get ready for breakfast.
We all helped, no matter how young or how old we were. I showed them where the chickens were, I showed them where the geese were, I showed them where the ducks were.
And I'd have to check the bathrooms to see if there's toilet paper and stuff. We didn't have no maids to do that.
I showed them where the horses were, I showed them where we milked the cows.
So you get through with breakfast, you got to set the tables for lunch, and so on for supper.
It was just a show-off deal for a little boy about this big.
Would you believe we had starch frilly curtains on every window in that place? And they had to be starched and dampened and pressed. And that was my big job all spring.
I gave dancing lessons. I was a pretty good dancer. Started with rumba, samba, cha-cha, and it was fun. And I would have as many as 100 people in the dance hall.
Kids helped their parents in those days. They didn't get allowances and get rewards. If you didn't, you might get a good smack, but you didn't get rewards for it.
None of us worked for wages. At the end of the summer, it was what Dad thought was fair for all of us.
I mean, everybody worked. There was no loafing around. The summer came and everybody was put to work. We'd have to make hay while the sun shines.
It was really a labor of love. We never considered it hard work, no matter how many hours we put in. But once the young people left, the parents could not operate without them, no matter how many help you had, because they were so much older and couldn't handle it.
The people that came to South Haven were easy to describe. They were in every facet of life. Dressmakers, tailors, there was doctors, there was attorneys.
In the early years, they would come by boat and by bus.
The husbands usually brought them out and dropped them off, the families, and then used to come out on weekends.
There would be someone at the bus station or at the boat docks to pick them up.
They just wanted to get away from the city, and they wanted to come and sit under the apple trees and the cherry trees, and they wanted to be fanned by the lake breezes.
Well, you would start your morning with your exercise and Simon Says exercise contest, which was a lot of fun. There would probably be a volleyball game or a baseball game or a session at the pool. And a very important part of the resort was the card room.
They play cards, oh boy, they play cards.
We'd have mock weddings, and those were hilarious. When you think about it now, you say, well, I don't know, people were silly, weren't they? But it was fun. It wasn't just being silly, it was just fun. And that's what they were there for.
When a guest arrived, they were assigned their own dining room table and their own waiter and busboy. The busboy would service them for the entire week.
Well, out on the farm resorts, they would go out and pick fruit. You know what I mean? Stuff like, they do things like that, see? Which was interesting to them because, you know, we were in the heart of the fruit belt.
My brother-in-law would go out and pick that corn for that meal right before we served. We'd have the pots boiling, we'd have a whole crew sitting there shucking corn and get that corn in there, and it was served just fresh picked the way corn should be.
Dinner was a dress dinner. Everybody dressed for dinner. We had dinner music.
We used to get our help from the University of Michigan, all that had some talent or were studying some sort, you know, kind of music or acting, and they would perform. They had a show every weekend, like Fiddler on the Roof and many others. They were very talented.
We did duets. One of our very, very memorable and recognizable as our number was Mr. Wonderful. Why this feeling? Why this glow? Why the thrill when you say hello? It's very hard not to cry when I sing this. I can tell you what my heart knows is true. And at the end it was Mr. Wonderful, Mrs. Wonderful, Mr. Wonderful, I love you. And we'd hug and kiss.
We'd get a group together and to go on one of those hay rides, and the singing and the storytelling. That was the most fun of all.
It was peaceful. That's what they came here for, and that's what they got, plus the fresh eggs and the fresh milk. And a little hanky-panky after the bonfires went out, and that was it.
People were more or less starting to come into South Haven for the summertime because they had the steamers coming in. Otherwise, before that, it was to drive from Chicago to South Haven, it was at least a 6-flat deal. They didn't go by the gallons of gas, they used how many flat tires you'd have.
But at that time, there were just a few resorts and a couple of cottage complexes, and most of them were restricted. They did not allow Jews. And there were signs to that effect, as a matter of fact, and that was one of the reasons my father was willing and wanted to buy a property and do something about it. It made him very angry.
The big reason why South Haven became popular is because of the Jewish Agriculture Society. If you needed $2,000, or if you needed $5,000, which was a big mortgage in those days, you didn't have to go through hell to get it. You got it.
It started out actually just as a farm and then became a farm resort. People, relatives would come and freeload, and so they decided to make a business out of it.
We had a lot of non-Jewish customers, and I would say it was a very mixed crowd.
Even though we were not a religious group, but on Friday nights we would have a Friday night service like they do in Jewish homes.
We weren't really strictly kosher. We had 2 separate sets of dishes, 2 kitchens and all that stuff, and we wouldn't serve no milk with meat.
It was the children that really operated the businesses. And then it started going down when they all got married and moved away.
When air conditioning became prevalent and people became much more affluent, they started sending their kids to camp and they traveled.
When they start making the highways and the cars start getting faster and no flatters, no flat tires like they used to have, they go to Florida, they went to California, they go to Las Vegas. You know what I mean?
It was like one big happy family. In fact, but by the time we closed, we had 4 generations of people staying.
So little by little, it just faded away. You know, like everything else, it faded away.